Okay, good morning and welcome to the regular council meeting of February the 28th, 2023. It is 9:07 p.m. AM, excuse me. We've been delayed. 9:07 a.m. and I will call this meeting to order. I would note for the record that Deputy Warden 𝗘𝗵𝗶𝗶 sends notice of his regrets. He will not be attending, and so he is absent with notice. Before we proceed with the agenda, I have a few remarks. Today, we remember past Elgin County Warden Harry Mezenberg, who passed away on February the 16th, 2023 at the age of 76. Mr. Mezenberg served 12 years on Elgin County Council as both Reeve and Deputy Reeve for the Township of 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶 from 1986 to 1997, and as Warden in 1996 and 1997. He presided over the historic discussions pertaining to the amalgamation of Elgin's municipalities that took effect in 1998 and resulted in the structure we have in place today. This was a monumental achievement made possible by Harry's ability to build compromise, respect all points of view, and engage our residents in the process. On behalf of Elgin County Council, I express my sincere condolences to Harry's family and to the municipality of West Elgin. His service to our community will not be forgotten. And now we will observe a moment of silence in the memory of Harry's passing. Thank you. First order of business is the adoption of the minutes.
Be it resolved that the minutes of the meeting held on February 14th, 2023 and February 28th, 2023 be adopted.
Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Noble will move. Councillor Hentz will second. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. I would remind council members of any disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. And moving on with section 4, presenting petitions, presentations, and delegations. This morning, I would welcome Mike Kirkfleet, Manager of Business Development and Enterprise regarding the Elgin St. Thomas Small Business Enterprise Center. Mike, would you please attend the podium?
Good morning. You get a bit of a 2-for-1 this morning, just for a starting point. But when I came in this morning, Mayor Sloan asked me why I'm here. And I'm Sean Dyke. I'm the CEO of the St. Thomas Economic Development Corporation, and we have the responsibility overseeing this Elgin St. Thomas Small Business Enterprise Center. And I'm here because it's important. This partnership that we have between the county and the city in economic development is an amazing example of regional economic development partnerships, and it's proof that it works. It's proof that when we work together, we can do something better. And I'm here to say thank you. I'm here to say thank you to Elgin County for all of the support. And I don't just mean financial. I mean, we've been partners since 2013 in this program. And it's not just the money that matters. It's the staff time. It's the team that you have that's working with us to support small business in our community. And we've had amazing success because of it. And I'd like to introduce Mike Kirkfleet to take over and tell you a little bit more about that. But again, just from myself to you, thanks so much for the contributions and for the support over the years. And we look forward to lots of great things coming in the future. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for having us here today. Ed, great pronunciation of my last name. Thank you. I don't know if that was homework that you did or if you've met some of the branches of my family in the past, but first time, good job. Thank you. So as I was introduced, I'm Mike Kirkfleet. I'm the Manager of Business Development and Entrepreneurship for the St. Thomas Economic Development Corporation. And as part of that role, I oversee and manage the Small Business Enterprise Center for St. Thomas and Elgin. And with some new faces on council, we just wanted to kind of come in and present, let you guys all know what we do. The county is a funder of this program. And honestly, we couldn't have the impact that we have across the whole county without that funding. So we're very appreciative of it. And we want to make sure that you guys know what we do and how we use that money. So this is kind of the quick agenda, pretty informal, but I just want to let you guys know who we are, what we do, and then where we're going. Next slide. All right, so we're the SBEC, right? That's our name. That's how we're in the community. One of the many acronyms that serve the community in St. Thomas and Elgin. And this is our team complement. So we've got me up there. We've got Sarah Noble. She's our manager of marketing and communications for St. Thomas Economic Development. And she does marketing for St. Thomas EDC as well as for the SBEC and for the Horton Market and for Railway City Tourism. So honestly, she's a heavy hitter. We're glad to have her. You'll notice that both she and I are listed as St. Thomas EDC. That's where our salaries are paid from. So just something to note going forward as we talk about budgeting. And then we've got our SBEC teams. We've got 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶, who's with me this morning. And she's going to talk a little bit about our programs that we offer in a minute. We recently brought onto the team Sarah Lynch in the business advisor position. She's actually been with us for a year prior to coming on board in this role through the My Main Street program, which was sort of a one-time program that we ran over the last year. She was our St. Thomas ambassador. We also had Michelle Nabakis in West Elgin, and we'll talk a little more about that program in a minute. And then we've got Darren Connolly, who's our rural business advisor and Horton Market coordinator. So he basically runs the Horton Market, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. And this is what our funding looks like. So the bulk of our funding is from the province of Ontario. Good to note with this is that $110,000 of that funding is grant funds. So those get spent out into the community every year, and the balance of which is then operational. And then St. Thomas EDC, Elgin County, Ontario Works, and some other miscellaneous revenue makes up the rest of our budget there. It is important to note at this point that that $65,000 is how much St. Thomas EDC puts into the SBEC as cash. But it doesn't account for the portion of my role that goes towards supporting the SBEC, portion of Sarah's role that goes towards the SBEC. We also often will sponsor SBEC events through St. Thomas EDC if we need to get a little more money in there to make ends meet. So, but that is more or less our funding breakdown. All right, so now I want to talk a bit about what we do, which is our programs. So I'm going to bring Elle up to support me through this part because she's the expert.
Good morning, everyone. So we have three main programs that we run, which are provincially funded. We have our SBEC core, which means that we will take calls from any business, new, expanding, or ready to sell. And we help people one-on-one, providing advice and marketing plans, business planning, all kinds of workshops, and lots of mentorship and community building, which is a key aspect of being in business here in St. Thomas and Elgin. One of our other core programs is Starter Company Plus. This is a $5,000 grant program. We are allowed to have 16 grants to give out per year. And we always end up breaking it out 50-50 between city and county. So it's quite exciting to see these businesses grow and take off. And obviously this is a small part of getting a business off the ground, but it's awesome to be a part of those journeys and those businesses. And our summer company program, which we are recruiting for right now, if you know any young youth between 15 and 30 who are returning to school, this is a program that helps young entrepreneurs learn the skills of being in business and get the experience of getting out in front of community members and making sales. It's a wonderful grant, and we have 10 positions for that, or spots in that program each year. And again, usually 50-50 between city and county. We have our Foodpreneur program. This is a really exciting program. It's a regional partnership between Oxford, London, 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶𝗶, SBECs. And what we've done is we pooled our resources and experts to provide a really one-of-a-kind program to help start food-based businesses. We've allocated 3 of our Starter Company Plus grants to fund specifically food-based businesses. Given this agritourism region, given the history of food in this area, we felt that this is a really good use of our time and skills, as well as leveraging that wider network. And last year we funded 3 businesses, so 2 from the county and 1 from the city through that program. Side gig, this program actually isn't coming through the provincial government. The funding for this was come through local sources. And really what it was meant for young people who are starting out in their careers and needing to have work on the side, which is a common issue. So we're seeing with young people. So it just allowed them to access funding to get started and try something out. And we've seen those businesses take off and become full-time businesses for multiple people that have participated. The grants are only $1,500, but it's just enough of a push to help young people get into business, which is awesome. And then I'll turn it back over to Mike for My Main Street to walk you through what we did last year.
Thanks, Elle. Yeah, so My Main Street was a one-time program that was funded to help businesses in commercial areas kind of have some money that they could put towards either improving processes or facade improvements, et cetera. And so we were fortunate in St. Thomas and Elgin to get two regions approved for this funding. So we got funding for the downtown of St. Thomas, then also for West Elgin. So we were able to give out 10 grants between West Lauren and Rodney within West Elgin. And actually the program was good to let us expand those boundaries a little bit. So for the most part, they keep it pretty tight to the commercial area and the commercial properties within the downtowns, which that's what they were focusing on. But we were able to get 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶 funded, who was outside of the commercial zone, as well as Natterjack Brewing, and as well as Brandywine Garden Market or Farm Market. I think they've changed the name too. So that was a great way to get $100,000 to each of those communities of provincial grant funds, as well as full-time staff. So for the grant period of February 14th to February 14th, 2022 to 2023, so this is just wrapped up, each area had a full-time My Main Street ambassador. So these people were meant to go out, and they did very effectively go out into the communities, make people aware of this program, and then sort of help them through the application and reporting process for that. So those two full-time jobs for a year as well. So this is a look at our impacts in terms of some of the KPIs that we track. So business starts, expansions, businesses sustained, which is a new metric that the province has us tracking through COVID, as that became a bit more of a focus, and then jobs created overall. Not quite a 50-50 split for some of these between city and the county, although this does fluctuate year to year based on what's going on. But it is a good measure just of the impact that we're able to have in the region. 100 jobs a year is not bad, right? There's nothing to shake a stick at. These are pretty consistent numbers that we see year over year. And then we also operate the Horton Farmers Market. So this is sort of new for us at EDC. There were some stumblings, we'll say, with the previous administration of the Horton Market through COVID. And so in 2021, EDC had the opportunity to take over operation of the Horton Market, which we did through the SBEC organizationally. So since that, we've been able to see an increase in total vendor sales. So after each market, we have the vendors anonymously report their revenue to us, so we can sort of track impacts of our marketing, et cetera, as we manage the market. And so since EDC's taken over, we've seen a 24% increase in total vendor sales, which is pretty good. And then a 78% at the Christmas market specifically. So that's an event that staff have put a lot of time and energy into expanding. About $750,000 of reported vendor sales in 2022, which is awesome. And so that's divided between, at any given market, there's probably about 60 vendors. Some will sort of flux in and out. So you're maybe dealing with maybe 70, 80, 90 vendors total, something like that, sharing that revenue. So yeah, more than 70 businesses attended the market as vendors. And then this year, we're actually introducing a winter market. So the goal is to make it so that rather than just being open during the season, just on Saturdays, we want to see the expansion of the use of that building because it's there. It's otherwise sitting vacant and empty, right? So this year, through the winter, we've run a winter market that we're seeing good traction for. It's doing about a third of the revenue that the full market does, using about a third of the footprint. So for those of you who haven't been to the Horton Market, it's one sort of indoor market building, long and skinny, and then two pavilions next to it that are approximately the same footprint. So third of the vendors, third of the revenue, that's pretty good as far as we're concerned. And then where we're going. So something that we're adding to the Horton Market in 2023 is a commercial kitchen. This is a barrier that we see almost all of our new food businesses face, right? A lot of them sort of start in their own kitchens, maybe doing things for their friends and family and things like that. And then when they make the step to trying to make that a commercial business, the big barrier they have is they need a commercial kitchen. So sometimes they're able to access this with facilities at churches or some community centers. Springfield's a great example. We know lots of people that access the kitchen in the Springfield Community Center. But there's just not enough capacity, not enough space, it's difficult to access. So we're going to put a commercial kitchen in. The goal with this will be that on an as needed basis, people will be able to rent blocks of time to go in and prep food or do whatever they need to do, with the hope of then allowing them to grow their businesses through that barrier and then eventually get their own bricks and mortar if that's what their business model will look like going forward. So that's the plan for that. We're pulling the funding together right now. We're going to get some money from Libro and then some other stakeholders. So look forward to that happening this year. And then lastly, with the SBEC and with everything we're doing, frankly, events are a big focus for us this year. Kind of getting things back going again after COVID, getting people back out into the community, attending events is a big thing. There was a big and we all experienced a big digital shift during COVID. And some things will probably stay that way, but for a lot of things, and especially in the case of networking and getting mentorship from peers and things like that, in person is better for people who want to access that. So, so we're going to be bringing that back. And then this year, in partner with the chamber, we're launching a youth entrepreneurs group. And so Elle actually gets a lot of the credit for this. She's been there from the ground floor. But the goal is to create a sort of tight network of young entrepreneurs who are all trying to do the same thing, and then sort of curate and bring in some mentors to come and present to this group and sort of expose them to some experienced business owners they can build mentorship relationships with and ask questions, et cetera. So the first one was held recently, a couple of weeks ago, and you can see that picture of the core group there. There's one guy there that seems like he doesn't quite belong, but we'll let Paul hang out because he's from the chamber. All right, so those are the kind of the things we're focusing on in 2023 as far as serving our business community. And that's the presentation that I've prepared, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody wants to know more about any of our programs or any of our initiatives that we're working on.
Well, thank you, Mike. Does any council member have any questions for regarding the Small Business Enterprise Center at this point? Yes, Councillor 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for the presentation. I'm interested in when you talk about your metrics in terms of the overall return on investment. So you talk about, let's say, 100 jobs for a $400,000 budget. So in context, is that a good number? Is that what we can expect compared to, other people in your field?
Sure, good question. If I'm honest, I don't know the answer for that. I do think that boiling it just down to jobs would be is tricky, right? Like obviously we have to track KPIs to know how we're doing. And while I couldn't cite specific numbers of other regions, I do know that in our dealings with the province, they're always extremely happy with the performance of our region. They have been historically. So which is a good indication. I think we're very happy with the job numbers, but also the business sustained numbers and the business start numbers that we saw through COVID. One of the things that surprised me a lot, and frankly, this was all happening prior to me stepping into this role, which was in December. But in St. Thomas, living in St. Thomas, I saw an astounding number of business starts during COVID. I think we probably gained like 15 or 20 new restaurants during COVID in St. Thomas, which does not make sense to me. That's not what we were seeing in London or what they were seeing in Toronto or anywhere else. While I would love to be able to give you a data-driven answer, and if you wanted to follow up, we could probably come up with some comparison or ask the province if they've got data that they could share. I do feel very good about the work that we do in the community and the impact that we have.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Warren, through you to Mike. I guess the biggest thing I see coming out of this is when you see the new business coming in for startup, that you're doing the planning, like 4-year, 5-year planning. And I think that's the biggest key thing you need to do to make sure that that business survives past 2 or 3 years. Because if the business fails, it usually affects other businesses along the way. So keep up the good work as far as the training goes. I think that's most important.
Thank you. Yeah, we totally agree. And just to speak to that a bit more, we sort of glossed over some of our programming, but for all of our grant programs, there's a mandatory training requirement. So, the $5,000 makes a difference for a lot of these businesses, but in a lot of ways, that's kind of the hook, right? That gets them in. They have to access, in the case of the Starter Company Plus program, 2 full days of training. And in those 2 days, we walk them through making a business plan. We do 2 years of financial projections with them, and that sort of all gets packaged up and given to a grant review committee that chooses who to fund. In reality, by the time they've gone through all of that, basically everything that goes forward to the grant committee, we're able to fund, which is good. But totally agree. The planning piece of it is important. And even outside of our program, someone can come in and access business planning support free of cost from our center at any time if they're from St. Thomas or Elgin.
Councillor Sloan.
Through you, Warden. A quick question here about your micro grant, and with respect to young people in high schools. You've come and presented to us this morning. Appreciate that, and I'm reading about what it is you do, and the good works you do as Councillor Jones says. What about engagement with students? Do you do anything in that field to give them an idea of what they can do? When I see micro grant, I have a couple of people in our house that are always talking about a new idea or something, and just wondered if there was any engagement at the high school level or in schools.
Yeah, absolutely. So the summer company program, which is sort of our main program for youth. So youth 15 to 29 can access that funding through the summer as long as they're returning to school. Through the promotion of that program, we're in as many classrooms as we can be. So this time of year, L is out in the schools wherever we can be. And frankly, like through any of your networks, we're always looking for more teachers to connect with, right? We'd love to be in even more classrooms than we are. So we do that. We also have a couple of engagements where for example, there's a French immersion careers teacher at Parkside who has added this isn't part of the careers curriculum, but he feels it's important. They've got a little entrepreneurship section that they do in 2 weeks of their class. And so at the end of those 2 weeks, they've got sort of like a pitch that they pitch to, and we always come in and act as part of the Dragon team that they sort of pitch to. And so absolutely, youth engagement is something that we focus on. One of the challenging things is just like getting teachers to want to dedicate time to having us come in and present. So like I say, any connections to teachers or schools, if you guys know anybody in your communities or if you're of any interest, let us know. We'd love to go in and engage even more than we do.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkley.
Now, anything further? Thank you again, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Be it resolved that the presentation from Mike Kirkfleet, Manager of Business Development and Entrepreneurship, Elgin St. Thomas Small Business Enterprise Center, be received and filed.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Jones will move. Councillor Noble will second. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on with section 5, Committee of the Whole.
Be it resolved that we do now move into Committee of the Whole.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Sloan will move. Councillor Noble will second. All in favor? And that is carried. Section 6, Reports of Council, Outside Boards and Staff. 6.1, Director of Homes and Senior Services. Homes, Long-Term Care Home Service Accountability Agreement, the 𝗖𝗂, Schedule E. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Warden, through you to members of council. Before you is the report on the Long-Term Care Home Service Accountability Agreement, otherwise known as 𝗖𝗂. The 𝗖𝗂 includes a schedule of reporting requirements for specific reports related to performance, occupancy, staffing, funding, and compliance. Schedule E, otherwise known as Form of Compliance Declaration, relates to a declaration by our CAO that the health service provider has fulfilled its obligations under the 𝗖𝗂 during the applicable period. To the best of staff's knowledge, the 3 County of Elgin homes have satisfied the requirements of Schedule E and recommend that this form be signed for each of the 3 homes. The documents are included in the agenda package, and there's 2 recommendations before council. First, that the report be received and filed, and second, that council authorize the CAO and warden to sign the 𝗖𝗂 Schedule E for the homes for the period of January 1 to December 31st, 2022. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you for the report, Michelle. Does anyone have any questions for Michelle on this? It's fairly standard. Thank you.
Be it resolved that the report titled Homes, Long-Term Care Home Service Accountability Agreement, 𝗖𝗂, Schedule E from the Director of Homes and Senior Services, dated February 13th, 2023, be received and filed, and that council authorize the Chief Administrative Officer and Warden to sign the Long-Term Care Home Service Accountability Agreement, 𝗖𝗂, Schedule E for the homes for the period of January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Those are wrong dates, right? January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023.
It's the prior year.
Oh, it's the prior year.
Yes.
Thanks, Michelle. It was correct in your report.
Thank you. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Hentz will move. Councillor Jiguer will second. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on with section 6.2, Manager of Economic Development, Tourism Strategic Initiatives regarding the tourism cruiser. Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Mr. Warden. Through you to council, or maybe I'll just wait a moment until we get that presentation up on the screen. So at the previous council meeting on February 14th, council provided direction that staff research alternative options for our tourism cruiser, including short-term lease and rental options and minivan pricing and availability. And this is just a recap of the current vehicle. So we currently have a 2013 Chevy Express, which has 250,000 plus kilometers on it. And over the past few years, it has become increasingly unreliable and it has been in the shop quite a few times for repairs. Next slide, please. So we followed up with CoTrack Ford again on the Transit Connect that we had ordered last year. And as of February 22nd, they still don't have a build date from Ford and no estimate when that might be in stock. And then the other compact cargo van option is the Ram ProMaster City Van. This is unavailable for order. Amazon has placed an order for 100,000 of these vans and the local dealerships are unable to get their hands on one. And the Ford Transit Connect and the ProMaster City Van are the two compact cargo vans on the market. And we're not looking to go to something larger. Larger cargo van is really more vehicle than we need. Next slide, please. And this is also our short-term lease option. So Bennett Fleet Rentals, we can lease the cargo van, the short cargo van for $2,400 a month. So for the 4 months that we would need it for the summer, that would come to $9,600. And we took a look at the 5 minivans on the Canadian market. And the next few slides just present the information on those vans. So there's the Chrysler Grand Caravan. So this one would be available in time for the tourism season mid-May. It does come $10,000 over our $40,000 budget though. Next slide. And then the Chrysler Pacifica. Again, we could get this in time for the tourism season, but again, it is over budget at $66,000. Next slide. The Kia Carnival, so that is just at $40,000 without HST and would end up coming over budget. And also we could not get one before 6 months, so leading us without a vehicle over the 4 summer months, and a rental is really not an option that we would consider for those 4 months. And next slide. The Toyota, so the lead time here is 4 years, also not an option. This vehicle is very much in demand. Next slide. And the Honda Odyssey, we contacted the Honda dealership, but they don't have a date as to when we would receive one. Very limited availability, if any, in Canada. So the lead time is very, very long or not at all. Of the minivans on the Canadian market, with HST, they are all over budget and most of them have long lead times. So it would be difficult to get one in time for our May market. The lead time, again, for most brands is upwards of 6 months and an interim lease cost would be cost prohibitive. The other thing with the minivan options, they're also less fuel efficient than an SUV. And while a compact cargo van was our initial choice, when we started looking for alternatives, a mid-size SUV started to become a viable option. We're confident that with efficient packing, we would be able to fit all of the cargo that we need into a mid-sized SUV. It's also more versatile than a cargo van and could have other corporate-wide uses. So this is a vehicle that if tourism did not need it, other staff could use it to attend meetings or conferences and things like that, which would also get this branded van on the road and be marketing and advertising for Elgin County tourism. Next slide, please. So this is just a recap of the things that we were looking for in a vehicle: reliability, storage, fuel efficiency, safety, something that's easy for students to maneuver. A big cargo van is something that is more difficult for a student to drive, especially young students who don't have as much experience driving. And availability, the event student begins on May 18th. And next slide, please. So at the previous council meeting, we did recommend the 2023 Honda CR-V. And this is a vehicle that we can get within 1 to 2 months, and at $37,000 with HST, it would fit the $40,000 budget. It is also, next slide, please, the vehicle that had the greatest storage capacity that fit our budget. And through our research from Consumer Reports, it's also has a great predicted reliability of 4 out of 5. And next slide, please. This is just a mock-up that we did of how it could potentially be branded. We would be working with someone to brand a vehicle when that time comes, but this is just, again, a mock-up of how we could potentially brand the vehicle once we do receive one. And next slide. So the recommendation is before you that due to ongoing supply issues impacting the availability of the Ford Transit Connect cargo van, staff be authorized to purchase a 2023 Honda CR-V LX as the new tourism cruiser with the purchase price not to exceed $40,000. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that report, Carolyn. All right, we've been here before. Any comments or questions for staff? Councillor Witt.
Yes, thank you, Warden 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶. Just a couple of questions. It appears we're just single sourcing a Honda CR-V. We're not looking at anybody else. Is that the way it works with our procurement policy, or I'm not aware?
Through Mr. Warden, as presented before council, there's a list of vehicle options which have been considered in terms of procuring the vehicle. Staff would reach out to multiple Honda dealerships and secure a unit for the least amount. There's 2 dealerships in London and other dealerships in the surrounding area as well, for which we reach out to and request a quotation for.
Well, if I could.
Councillor Whitner.
Looking at several of these SUVs, I mean, GM makes the Equinox. It's actually cheaper than this and has a comparable storage capacity, and to be local. I'm a big proponent of buying local if we can. But even for servicing, it'd be a lot easier to get it serviced in St. Thomas than it would be taking 2 people over to London to get it serviced. But just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sloan.
Through you, Warden. What's the cost of the branding estimated at?
So we have not gone out for the cost of the branding just yet. That would be covered under the tourism budget for marketing and promotions.
Through Mr. Warren to Councillor Sloan, last time a branded vehicle was undertaken a couple years ago, I think it was in the magnitude of about $5,000. Was my recollection. Again, it completely dependent upon the wrap design and the extent to which a vehicle is wrapped as well.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Councillor Noble.
I echo Councillor Winter's comments that it'd be nice to source something local. And it'd be more efficient to have it serviced if it was local than going to London.
Councillor 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, I would go along those lines of often when you go to tender, you publish your list of criteria. We're looking for, this capacity and this fuel efficiency, and perhaps if we go to tender, not limiting it to the model that we have chosen. What if there's a local dealer who has something similar that can actually meet all the check boxes? So I don't know if we could open it up a little bit, but it's good. We have the research, it's done. But could we open it up to something else?
Carolyn, please.
Mr. Warden, through you to council. So I did speak with Mike Hoekstra, our purchasing, the manager of purchasing, and he did indicate that it would be difficult to go out to RFP or RFQ for a vehicle since there's such a high demand. It's not likely that any dealerships would respond because they are able to sell the vehicles without making the extra effort to go to RFQ. The last time we issued one, we only received one response, even though we sent it to multiple dealers. So again, it's something that we certainly are willing to do. It's just we may not get a good response.
Councillor Sloan.
Thank you. Through you, Warden. Last time there was a discussion, one of the councillors asked, I'm not sure who it was, about a vehicle that was currently on a lot. And we were going to investigate whether there was I think someone said like nearly new or something, Carolyn. There was, as I recall, maybe I'm wrong, there was discussion about looking into some sort of a vehicle that might be currently available. And I'm not sure if it was Councillor McPhail or Councillor Whitner, but I just wanted to follow up and see if someone had looked into that. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to council, I'm not aware of a new vehicle owned by the county that would be available for tourism. We do have the current vehicle that is on the lot, but that is a 2020 or a 2013.
Yep. Brian, please.
Through Mr. Warden, to Councillor Sloan, we did explore and did have a discussion with one local dealership that specifically had, I believe it was a caravan on the lot, but when we made that phone call, they confirmed that it had already been sold the previous day. So in terms of used models, I do recall that Councillor Widner had mentioned that. But at the same time, the comment I think also expressed by Councillor Widner was that it was still quite costly for a used unit with kilometers that had already been amassed on that vehicle. So it was almost break even, quite frankly, as compared to a new model.
Okay, Councillor Widner.
Thank you, Warden 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶. Just one thing I want to bring up. I'm looking at this pile of stuff we're going to put in the back of this SUV. Is it really safe to be putting that much stuff in the back of this thing? If you ever had an accident, this stuff's all going to go flying forward. There's no protection on the van. At least they have the divider. But yeah, vans have a divider front, a steel plate. That one actually has one too. So if anything comes ahead, it'll stop there instead of going into the passenger compartment. Just a concern that I would have. Look, some of the stuff looks fairly heavy. So just a concern I have. Thank you.
Before you respond, I'm going to respond.
Mhm.
Yes, on the cargo van, you're absolutely correct. There's a steel divider, but if you think about whether it's a minivan or something like that, there's no divider. There's a cargo net you could put up, or you've got seats in there. So I guess I will acknowledge your concerns. I don't believe that should be the deciding factor. Carolyn.
So we will be looking into different ways of storing the material that we put in the vehicle. So again, purchasing storage containers or totes that are stackable and that can be easily secured. So we will not be putting the items in the cardboard boxes like we did with the other cargo van that we had. So we will be looking for secure storage options.
Okay. One final comment I'm going to make is that we've been over this a couple of times at different council meetings. I trust that staff have done their research and have come back with a viable option for council to consider. And there is a motion that is drafted for us for your consideration. Unless there's an alternative, I would encourage support of that motion. So having said that, unless there's further discussion, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Warden. Just a comment. I know with the last couple RFPs that Southwold has gone out for pickup trucks, it's the same. You don't get responses. You might get one, possibly two, but it's they like I think Brian said that they aren't or Carolyn said that they aren't interested in doing this because they're too busy. They don't need to. So I think we need to move on.
Any further comments before I have the motion read? Okay, Julie, please.
Be it resolved that due to ongoing supply issues impacting the availability of the Ford Transit Connect cargo van, staff be authorized to purchase a 2023 Honda CR-V LX as the new tourism cruiser with the purchase price not to exceed $40,000.
Okay, with that motion on the floor, is there anyone willing to move and second? Councillor Hentz will move. Anyone willing to second? Councillor Jones. Okay. All in favor? Would any opposed? I would call that carried. Thank you. 6.3, Manager of Administrative Services, Deputy Clerk, Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. Committee appointments. Jenna.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to members of council. The purpose of this report is to provide council with the opportunity to review the 3 applications that were received from community members who have expressed interest in joining the Central Elgin Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. George Corin, 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶, and Tom Marks have submitted applications, and all are residents or business owners of Elgin County who either identify as a person with disabilities as a caregiver or close family member of a person with disabilities or are employed in a related profession. Should council decide to appoint the 3 applicants, there will still be 1 vacancy on the committee and staff will continue to advertise for that vacant position. Lastly, as this is a joint committee with the municipality of Central Elgin, the staff report, council resolution, and applications will be forwarded to Central Elgin for their review and endorsement as well. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Jenna. Any questions for staff on this? Okay, then, can we have the motion, please?
Sure, be it resolved that the report titled Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, or JAAC, Committee Appointments dated February 16th, 2023, from the Manager of Administrative Services and Deputy Clerk be received and filed, and that George Corrin, 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶, and Tom Marks be appointed to the Elgin and Central Elgin Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee for the 2023 to 2026 term, subject to the approval of the Council of the Municipality of Central Elgin.
Mover and seconder, please. Counselor Whitner will move. And Counselor Hentz will second. All in favor? Thank you, and that's carried. Section 6.4. Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Financial Services, 2023 Budget, Public Engagement and Options Presentation. Now, before we get into this, I want to ask, because I suspect this is going to be a little lengthy, do you need a break before we do this? All right, so let us take a 10-minute break and then we'll engage this topic. Thank you. Welcome back. Got to get used to the microphone. All right, we left off with section 6.4 from the Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Financial Services regarding the 2023 budget public engagement and options presentation. Julie, please.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Through you to members of council, I'm pleased to present an overview of the public engagement initiative undertaken by staff as directed by council. So as part of today's presentation, we'll cover a bit of background, review the survey and the survey results, and we'll take a look at the community conversation that we had. To offer a bit of background, at its meeting on January 25th, 2023, council directed staff to engage the community in the budget process and seek feedback regarding the draft budget. Public engagement, I don't think I have to tell council why it's important since this was direction provided by you, but participatory budgeting does enable the public to be engaged in the budget process, provide feedback with respect to the initiatives that you're undertaking or planning to undertake, and how you intend to distribute public resources and prioritize those services. Next slide, please. So we did distribute a 6-question survey and published this on Engage Elgin's website. We asked residents and interested stakeholders, businesses alike, to respond to a number of questions, including how familiar they are with the services and programs funded by the County of Elgin's budget. We asked how familiar they are with how the county develops the annual budget and whether or not they had reviewed the draft 2023 budget. The last 3 questions were designed to assess respondents' familiarity with the county's budget, the process by which we develop the draft budget, and whether respondents have actually reviewed it before they dug a little bit deeper into some really targeted questions that we asked. Next slide, please. The next question, or question 4, was designed to gauge how respondents wanted us to balance the budget in light of increased costs of maintaining service levels and increasing demands for services. We asked, due to the increased cost of maintaining service levels and supporting infrastructure, the county must balance tax rates with increasing demands for services. The county has a number of options when balancing the budget. We asked respondents to indicate which of the following statements comes closest to capturing their point of view. The first of which was, I would prefer to keep tax increases at an inflationary level in order to maintain services. The second, I would prefer to maintain the tax rate, even if it means reducing some services in order to maintain others at last year's rate, which we indicated was 1.68%. The third was, I would prefer to increase taxes in order to expand and enhance services at the county. And the fourth was, I would prefer to decrease taxes by reducing county services. The 5th question, as directed by council, was to explore options associated with the savings realized through the tender associated with the Centennial and Elm Roundabout. So we indicated that we had realized $566,000 in savings associated with a significant transportation capital project that will soon be undertaking. And we asked respondents for their preference and gave them 4 options. The first was to plan for the future by applying all of the savings to a reserve for investment, which may help to avoid a spike in tax rates in the future. The second was to apply all of the savings to further lower the tax rate. The third was to apply a portion of the savings to a reserve for investment in a future project and use the rest to lower the proposed tax rate of 2.07%, so a hybrid option. And the fourth was prefer not to answer. The final question was open-ended, and we received 30 or so comments, which were included in your agenda. So the next slide indicates that we had 101 surveys completed. This is a relatively low response rate, though there are general themes that we can extract from this information and some pretty valuable comments. But in general, the results are not generalizable to the broader population that we serve. Some comments which can be, we tried to collate them into some buckets or themes. One respondent indicated this was a fantastic budget. There were 4 responses indicating that there may be opportunities to explore other sources of funding. Some specifically mentioned development charges. One respondent indicated a need for updated property assessments. One indicated the staff increase was too high. 2 respondents relayed a concern regarding affordability. 5 indicated that there is likely more opportunity to cut and or seek additional internal savings. 4 referenced a need for intercommunity transportation services and or hospice and or EMS service enhancements. And 2 respondents were very clear in their desire to ensure investment in infrastructure was maintained. So the majority of respondents, or 46.5%, were somewhat familiar with the services and programs funded by the county's annual budget, and 27.7% of respondents were very familiar. 40% of respondents were not at all familiar with how the county develops the annual budget, and 38% of respondents were somewhat familiar. So this high response rate in this category means there's more work to be done with respect to how we educate the public on how we develop the process and engage them, perhaps earlier in the process. 50% of respondents had reviewed the draft budget, whereas 42% of respondents had not. And 41% of respondents would prefer to maintain the tax rate, even if it means reducing some services in order to maintain others at last year's rate. Whereas 38% of respondents would prefer to keep the tax increases at an inflationary level in order to maintain services. So this is quite telling here. When we asked about the $566,000 in savings associated with the roundabout, 45% of respondents indicated that their preference is that a portion of the savings be applied to a reserve for investment in a future project, and the rest be used to further lower the proposed tax rate of 2.07%, so the hybrid option. 34% of respondents indicated that these savings should be used as part of a plan for the future and fully invested in reserve funds to avoid future tax spikes. 21% of respondents would like to see all the savings used to lower the tax rate. So we did have a relatively short engagement period, which ran from January 30th to February 15th. And in future, I think we'll work with the budget committee to make sure that we have a more fulsome engagement process moving forward that starts right at inception or the commencement of council's budget deliberations. We did focus our efforts through the Engage Elgin and Invest in Elgin website or webpage, which also includes other important budget information, including key dates, the timeline, and the draft budget itself. So this page is intended to help the community navigate the budget approval process and see what's being proposed in 2023. We also had print resources available for anyone who's not leveraging technology and or social media to ensure that we were capturing them as part of our community conversation as well. So we had 518 webpage visits through this period and 75 downloads of the 2023 proposed budget document. And we took out a Facebook advertisement about the budget survey and targeted individuals 18 to 65 located in Elgin County, which resulted in a reach of 19,359 of those links were actually clicked, and 27 users shared our Facebook post. So the survey responses and their comments are included in the response report that was attached to your council agenda. And we also included on page 89 is a sample of one of our promotional materials that was used to engage our community, and credit for the beautiful design goes to 𝗖cie𝘂𝗶𝗶, our marketing and engagement coordinator for the county. She did a great job. And that wraps up kind of part one, which is the community engagement or community conversations that we had about the budget. So we'd be pleased as a team to answer any of your questions before we jump right into the 2023 budget options.
Are there any questions and or comments regarding the survey results? Councillor Shiga.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a comment to say, not to minimize that the public was involved at the beginning. So we did have a survey back in September for an extended period. That went into the development, and then we sort of went back for validation and further input. So I didn't want to, the record to show that, no, we only had 2 weeks of input. So it was a further process, but there's always room to continue to improve that. So thank you. Well done.
Anything additional? Okay.
Great. So I'm excited to introduce Elgin County's 4th budget meeting before I turn things over to the Director of Financial Services. Today's presentation has been developed to review council direction and budget development process, to take a look at our 10-year plan and reserves, and consider, as directed by council, a number of options with respect to deferred projects, review a staff recommendation, take a look at key considerations, and progress into next steps and hear from council about the proposed budget. So with respect to council direction, at its meeting on February 14th, council did receive a presentation regarding the proposed deferred projects and requested the following as our direction for today's meeting: impact of deferred projects on the 10-year plan, additional information regarding reserves, information regarding the potential impacts to the tax rate resulting from those project deferrals, impact on the changes on the residential rate per $100,000 assessment. And we were asked to explore and present options as well as recommendations. So we have endeavored to compile and present all of this information as part of your review today. And I would like to once again commend the finance team, in particular Jen Ford, as well as Brian Lima and his team for their quick turnaround of the scenarios and for their support getting us through the quick turnaround between council meetings. When it comes to budget development on January 9th, we did provide an introduction to council, a budget overview and an overview of survey results, identified budget risks and opportunities, and we reviewed the 10-year plan and provided departmental presentations. On January 25th, which was council's second budget meeting, we presented the budget in a format designed to respond to council's desire for departmental business plans and included information for the public with regard to our budget process, tax bills, terminology, and additional resources. We also included some additional resources which will aid in the transparency and accountability of our budget process. As part of this material, we provided more information on county services, both for council's information and predominantly for the public. Information about the 10-year plan was also included as part of the financial backup information. On February 14th, we responded to council's desire to review projects that were deferred or recommended for deferral, and staff were directed to provide further information related to pressures on the 10-year plan, options on the tax rate, including scenarios that contemplate deferred projects. Just to recap the 10-year plan, and we have provided a similar slide at each of your budget meetings to date, but council is required to approve the current year budget. So our focus remains on 2023, but we do have an obligation to review the 10-year plan, which serves as a guideline for future expenditures. And council does approve that plan in principle. Once approved, it is important to note that the transportation master plan is anticipated to impact that 10-year plan. So with that in mind, I've put a little note here that we expect that the budget committee will have an interest in completing a thorough review of that 10-year plan in Q2, Q3 of this year in advance of council's budget deliberations. So that will really help streamline the process and incorporate that transportation master planning into the 10-year budget and council's future budget deliberations. The 10-year plan also assumes annual increases of 2% to account for inflation. So another important note to keep in mind. So with that, with your consent, Mr. Warden, I'd like to turn things over to the Director of Finance to take over and discuss project reserve fund balances.
Through you, Mr. Warden, two members of council. Just a recap, at the January 25th meeting, we did hear about the capital reserve balance at the end of 22 was $2.14 million. The 2023 anticipated use of those funds was 1.5 million, which would drop that capital reserve down to about $500,000. And then if we were to add back the savings from the roundabout project, we would end up at about $1.1 million in that fund for 2024 or future use. At that meeting, you didn't hear about the growth reserve balance, but at the end of 2022, that's expected to be $500,000 added to that reserve. So that would put the reserves in about $1.6 million range for future use. Deferrals, just for your review, the first deferral is Fingal Line reconstruction, which will be referenced as CR16 at 2.32 million, and St. George Street reconstruction, CR26 at 3.23 million. The proposed budget currently contemplates both of these as deferred and are valued at 5.7 million in 2024, which includes assumed inflationary increase. So the options that we're presenting today are the proposed budget as we presented originally in the proposed budget document. We will then include both of the deferred projects in the 2023 budget with some options. Option 3 will be option 1 again, but with a revised 10-year plan. And option 4 is including CR16 in 2023 with a deferral of Road 26 into 2024. And that will utilize the revised 10-year plan. And in option 5 will include CR26 in 2023 and defer CR16 into 2024 using the revised 10-year plan. And just a reminder that all of these are in the appendix that were provided with this report so that you can see the full 10-year plan and the effects. For each option, the following is also presented. Required use of the capital reserve fund, if any, allocation of the project savings from Centennial and Elm Roundabout, the resulting tax rate increase, and the residential tax rate implications as a result of that increase. So option 1 maintains the project deferrals and is the budget as previously presented. It required the use of capital funds in the amount of 1.02 million. That was the reserve funds. And the entire project savings of 566,000 was reallocated back to the capital reserve fund for future use. The resulting tax rate was 2.07%, and the residential tax rate increase implications was $13.18 per $100,000 of assessment. Option 1A maintained the project deferrals, but had no dependence on the capital reserve fund. It also reallocated the $566,000 back to the capital reserve fund for future use. And the resulting tax rate is 4.53%, with the residential tax rate implications being $28.79 per $100,000 of assessment. Option 1B had no dependence on the capital reserve fund, utilized some of the project savings of $321,000 and allocated the remaining balance of 245 to the capital reserve fund for future use. This showed that the tax rate could be reduced down to 3.76% with the tax rate implications of $23.88 per $100,000 of assessment. As a comparison, in option 2, both of the tax rates, both of the projects were brought into the plan. In the first option, we showed that there was a significant deficit on the budget. So option 2A, we required the use of the capital reserve fund again at 1.21 million. 1.021 million. The entire project savings of 566,000 we allocated back to the capital reserve fund as per the other options, and this resulted in a 15.42% increase on the average tax rate, and the residential tax rate implications were $98.04 per household. Or sorry, per 100,000 of assessment, to be clear. In option 2B, no dependence on the capital reserve fund was used. Again, the savings were put into the capital reserve fund for future use, and this resulted in an increase of 17.9% increase in the tax rate at $113.65 per 100,000 of assessment on the residential tax rate. Options 3, 4, and 5, as previously mentioned, will be based on an amended 10-year plan with the expectation that we were trying to avoid spikes in that future plan and resulting tax rate increases as a result of those spikes. The plan mainly involved deferring the large investment projects, which were urban reconstruction projects. And the following options 3, 4, and 5 will be based on that new 10-year plan. So option 3A was maintaining project deferrals as we did in option 1. No dependence on the capital reserve fund. The entire savings allocated back to the capital reserve fund. The resulting tax rate was the same, 4.53% as in option 1A, and the resulting tax rate implications were $28.79 per 100,000 of assessment on the residential rate. Option 3B, we're maintaining those same project deferrals with no dependence on the capital reserve. Some of the project savings, approximately 321, was allocated to the remaining, and the remaining balance was put back into the capital reserve. We were able to, again, shift the tax rate down a little to 3.76%, with the residential tax rate implications being $23.88 per 100,000 of assessment. Option 4A contemplates taking into consideration the completion of Road 16 in 2023 and deferring Road 26 to 2024. In this option, we used the capital reserve fund, 1.021 million. We put the entire project savings back into the reserve fund for future use, and the tax rate was 7.66% in this scenario, with the residential tax rate implications being $48.64 per 100,000 of assessment. In option 4B, the undertaking of that road had no dependence on the capital reserve fund. The entire project savings of 566 was allocated to the capital reserve fund for future use, and the tax rate was 10.11%, with the implications being $64.26 increase per $100,000 assessment on the residential tax rate. Option 5A contemplates taking into consideration Road 26 in 2023 and deferring Road 16 into 2024 with the use of the Capital Reserve Fund and putting the project savings back into the capital reserve for future use. The tax rate ends up being 9.85% increase with the residential tax rate implications at 62.58% increase per 100,000 of assessment. Option 5B, with no dependence on the capital reserve, again, savings into the capital reserve fund. The tax rate will be in the neighborhood of 12.31% increase with the residential tax rate implications on being 78.19 dollars per 100,000 of assessment. On this slide, we provided all the information for you in a summarized form, just to indicate that, you know, there is one very high percentage rate being both of the options in the plan, current year plan, and no use of the capital reserve. The lowest one being the one that was presented. And then there is some slightly higher ones that option that council may choose to take into consideration. So the decision that is before council today is to provide direction for proposed budget as originally presented, to include both the deferred projects into the 2023 budget, to defer both projects with a revised 10-year plan, to include Road 16 in 2023 and defer Road 26 into 2024 utilizing the 10-year plan, to include Road 26 into 2023 and defer Road 26 into 2024 using the revised 10-year plan. Staff recommends option 1B with no dependence on the capital reserve. Some utilizing some of the project savings, about 321,000, and allocate the remaining balance back into the capital reserve. This results in a tax rate of 3.76% with the residential rate implications of $23.88 per 100,000 of assessment. And why did we choose option B? So based on council feedback from its meeting on February 14th, there was interest in exploring ways to responsibly plan for future while ensuring affordability for ratepayers, and staff recommends option B avoids the dependence on the capital reserve fund, enables a portion of the project savings to be reallocated back to the capital reserve fund for future use, results in a tax rate that is below inflation, and substantially maintains council's approved asset management plan from 2022. Key considerations. Recently, we had an impromptu survey of county budgets, and around us, most of the average budgets are 5.5% increase in 2023. Some are higher, some are lower. The 10-year plan that we currently have commences Terrace Lodge redevelopment financing, debt refinancing in 2024 at a half year, and then in 2025 at its full year amount. So that is not impacting 2023 at this time, but will impact future years. And also the transportation master plan recommendations for that project have not yet been received. And we do anticipate that there will be future impacts for the budget in 2024 and beyond. And we expect that a key task of the budget committee will be to review the 10-year plan in preparation for 2024 and beyond, And other considerations that you might want to consider at this time would be a multi-year budgeting option. Some of our neighboring municipalities are doing that, like the City of London. And I believe Central Elgin does do a 2-year budget. Next steps would be for us to receive direction regarding council's preferred option, finalize a budget for council's approval at the March 14th meeting, and receive other direction as required at this time.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, I'm going to kick things off here with just a confirmation that the differences between plans or options 1 and 2 from 3, 4, and 5 is that 3, 4, and 5 is reworking the 10-year plan. It's essentially kicking down the road some of the urban renewal projects, correct?
Correct.
So what would be the advantage from staff's perspective of say recommending option 1A over 3A?
They would, and
They're essentially the same.
essentially they are the same, yes, sir.
So that's what I mean. What's the difference?
It would just,
If we're not going to use the projects or do the projects now and defer them, would we not keep up and just rework the 10-year plan?
through you to council, there would be, the option is that we just did a rework of the budget for your information. And essentially they are the same. It would be whether or not we would start with the budget committee using the first plan or using the second plan. It would be up to council's wishes.
Okay. To the floor, Councillor Sloan.
Thank you. So you've got about $16 million in capital for next year. You've noted 2 and the 2 projects there. What's the next largest project?
Off through you, Councillor 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶, Warden 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶 to Councillor Sloan. I don't have that information off the top of my head, but Brian maybe will be able to provide that.
Okay, because we've got $16 million that we are spending. You've talked about 5 million that could be deferred. I'd like a little more information on what else could be deferred, if anything, please. And the second question I have is it fair to say that $400,000 in operating or any kind of in budget works out to about 1% for that?
Yes, that is correct. Approximately 420,000 is 1%.
Thank you. May I follow up, Mr. Warden? Oh, sorry, so still able to?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There was a comment made at a council meeting about wages, and I know I'm straying off a little here, being that for the 10-year or a plan that had been done, we're at 2%. And then I heard a number of 2.5%. Could you just confirm which is the case for 2023, please?
For 2023 at council's last meeting, I believe we did receive the bylaw to increase wages for non-union at 2.5, and throughout the 10-year plan, it is set at 2.
Yeah, so is it an anomaly for 2023, or I just don't understand the difference? Thank you.
Yes, each year we do review that, and it is council's wishes to either increase or decrease depending on what the recommendation that is received from HR is.
Thank you. Thank you, Warden.
Additional comments? Questions? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I'll stick my neck out. As a taxpayer, increases are assault on anybody's pocketbook. That being said, deferring projects is going to be an assault on our pocketbook going forward. That's just putting something off till tomorrow, and at some point that's going to come back to bite you. It's going to bite hard. I respect staff's opinion of their preferred option, but responsibly, haven't seen this at my own township. I think I'm kind of leaning towards 4A myself. That's personally, I don't like it. from a pocketbook standpoint, but I think it's the responsible thing to do.
Thank you for your comments, Counselor. To be honest with you, if we as a council were to take on both projects, I realize it puts an untenable tax rate out there. But it also does narrow that infrastructure gap and what our shortfall will be for next year. It's the lowest if you go through and look at the charts. If you take on one of the projects, that at least narrows it down some. And I think maybe what we need to do is maybe approach this piecemeal, like, and it goes back to the decision, which was on, what is that, page 47 of this particular report. So I think maybe if we approach it in that perspective, do we have a discussion around, do we include the deferred projects or one deferred project? Is that how we start this discussion? Is there a principle in place? Are we looking at a lower tax rate today and a higher one tomorrow? Or are we looking at something to smooth things out? So just kicking it off. Councillor Gier.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I believe that our starting position should be the starting position that we took going out to the public, which was with 2 deferred projects. The very first presentations from staff, right from the get-go, included the deferral of those projects. When we inquired further, I did not hear any compelling arguments that we were putting the actual infrastructure in any kind of risk. So it seemed like a smart risk if there's such a thing. And we have a few more unknowns in terms of, I do believe there will be some additional savings in future years. And where there will be a way to manage those costs in a way that avoids those spikes. So I think to honor the position that, you know, we went to the public with the assumption that we were deferring those projects. We're hearing also from the public that a half and half, you know, use some of, you know, of the money towards a tax rate, but use some for future reserves, is what we're hearing from the majority of respondents. So to me, that does lead to the conclusion of the 1B option recommended by staff.
Thank you for your comments. I would begin my comments on the premise that as members of council, you're probably more informed than the public is on what's going on and what's happening. I would also take it from the premise that as elected officials, you're there to do the best you can to represent the public interest, not necessarily do what the public tells you to do. Okay.
Just to follow up on that, that the recommendation of 1B is also the recommendation of staff who are experts both in our infrastructure management and our finances. So it's not strictly a recommendation of the public. It happens to be supported by the public. So there's a synergy there.
Absolutely. And it goes back to the question I put to staff. Why would we consider options 1 or 2 over options 3 or 4 and 5 in terms of reworking the capital plan? If we are talking about deferring things down the road, should we not be talking in that sense of the reworked capital plan? Hog the floor. Anybody else? Councillor Hen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. These are difficult times. And I look at this budget, but I gotta think of people's personal budget as well. And that's why I think the staff recommendation of 1B makes a lot of sense to me. It's reasonable. I believe most municipalities are looking at some deferrals right now. I know we are. And the comment that it's not a safety or putting our infrastructure in jeopardy. I paid attention to that comment. So right now I would support 1B. I really think it's a responsible budget in this time.
Yes, Brian, please.
Through Mr. Warden, to circle back to Councillor Sloan's comment in terms of the next largest capital project that is identified for the 2023 budget that would proceed would be resurfacing of Sunset Road from City of St. Thomas limits all the way through to Port Stanley. That project has a value of about $3.3 million. Staff is consistently of the opinion that maintaining roads in good repair should first and foremost be your priority. And again, once again, deferring the reconstruction projects as has been proposed doesn't pose a safety risk and continues to be staff's recommendation. Extending life cycle investment beyond their prescribed time periods does jeopardize the life cycle of the overall asset of the county's infrastructure. And so maintaining that rehabilitation investment is critically important to maintaining a good standing report card, for lack of better words, as it relates to the county's infrastructure.
Thank you for those comments. Well, I give people a chance to think about what they want to say or ask questions. I was just going to, I thank you both Councillor Hens and Jones and Giguère for your positions on this. I might as well put my cards on the table. I rank these things in my preference, and I will admit that I do prefer option 4A first, and then options either 1A or 3A, and then 1B in that order. The reason is I still think we need to, if we're not going to do a project, then you need to put stuff away for next year for when these things are going to come. I hope and anticipate we'll find some savings, but it's not a guarantee. We don't know that. And just to be prudent, so we don't come back with a huge rate on somebody next year. Let's just be prudent about this. So Councillor Whitner, you had some comments.
Yes, thank you, Warden 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶. I just need a clarification. I know we're basing our numbers on the $100,000 assessment. What is the average assessment we're looking at? Is it 3, 4? I don't know. Yeah. I realize they're different. I looked at several yesterday, but I mean, what's the average?
Through you, Mr. Warden, I believe I've got, it's around 236, somewhere in that neighborhood. 236,000 is the average
Okay.
impact value assessment from 2016. So we haven't had anything increase since that time.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Noble.
What's the impact of the Terrace Lodge redevelopment? You mentioned that we were going to have some costs there associated with the servicing of the debt, and that's going to be 2024.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Noble. It is set at one right now. It depends on when we take out the final loan. But right now it's in the range of 1.6 million debt repayment. The province will provide us with $766,000 per year in order to help service that debt at this point. So we'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million on the tax base.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. We did go to the people with option 1, which dealt with 2.07%. So I'm still thinking of that in the back of my mind. However, having heard the comments about future needs and future capital expenses, that 1B does seem like the best compromise because it doesn't raise the tax rate all that much, and it does allow for an additional $1 million to remain in the capital fund. So I would support 1B.
Councillor Sloan.
Mr. Warden, thank you. The $70 million budget, $700,000 is a rounding error, and that's essentially 1.7%. It's surprising to me in certain ways of the decisions that are made, and as I'm getting to understand them better, I will have more time and knowledge. But I'd like to concur with Councillor Giguère that we went to the public with a document that these were deferred. I appreciate that we have some long-term commitments. We also have a long-term obligation to seeing what our operating budget is for next year and the years after, and seeing how we can make any changes to that that might help the ratepayer. So I'd like to just reinforce what Ms. Councillor Cook had said, that I will go with the recommendation of staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Noble.
Through you, Mr. Warden. So coming back to Terrace Lodge, are we looking at about a 2% for next year, just to service that debt?
Yeah, yes, that is correct.
Councillor Jones.
And that being said, plus inflation puts her up to 4% right off the bat, right before we start any discussions at the budget committee.
Councillor Giguère.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would just caution ourselves to not speculate on next year's budget. It's like that, these percentages are completely out of context. So not looking at the rest of the operating budget, not looking at other infrastructure opportunities, not looking at the transportation master plan that has, to me, there's just way too much speculations to actually factor in suddenly a 4% figure into our decision today. We'll leave that to the budget committee.
Thank you for those comments. You go to the charts and see what's mapped out for the future. We're locking at 3.6% already next year. I realize it's not an easy decision. We want to reduce the burden on our ratepayers. We must, but we have to be responsible to the needs of the county as well. So we can reduce those burdens on the ratepayers down the road. So you can pay me now or pay me later. That's the philosophy that we're dealing with. Councillor Giguère.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would move that we direct staff to proceed with option B.
Which B?
At 1B, sorry.
So maintain the capital plan as is. And with that rate.
If I may clarify, Mr. Warden, I personally, I again agree that the budget committee needs to have a look at the capital plan. I don't differentiate a lot between 1B and 3B. I think the 10-year plan needs to be looked at no matter what, and there will be adjustments to be made. There are a few unknowns. The transportation master plan being one, and other operational savings that may materialize, I don't know. So for the sake of argument, I'll stick with 1B, knowing that the capital plan, the 10-year plan is not carved in stone.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Sloan.
I was going to second that, Warden.
All right. Julie, you have a motion duly moved and seconded on the floor. Would you read that, please?
Be it resolved that staff be directed to prepare a final budget for council's consideration at its meeting on March 14th, 2023 that reflects option 1B as presented today, maintaining project deferrals with no dependence on capital reserve fund, utilizing $321,000 of capital project savings and allocating the remaining balance, $245,000 to capital reserve fund for future use.
Any additional discussion before I call the question? All right, then, all in favor? Any opposed? So that was carried. 5-3. All done? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on now with council correspondence. 7.1 items for consideration. 7.11, resolution for municipality of Central Elgin regarding parking on Bridge Street in Port Stanley. 7.1, do we deal with these independently or all together?
I would consider these independently.
Thank you. Okay. Who wants to discuss that one? Please.
Through Mr. Warden, the request has been received, as noted in the correspondence, from the municipality of Central Elgin. Staff is happy to consider that and table a report before you at your next meeting. Traditionally, county staff have supported the requests from our local municipal partners in this regard, and so we're happy to report back if so desired by council.
Is that amenable to council? We'll entertain a staff report before taking any action on this. Okay. Does anyone have a motion crafted for that?
Be it resolved that staff be directed to provide a follow-up report with respect to parking on Bridge Street in Port Stanley.
Thank you. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Noble will move. Seconded by Councillor Jones. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 7.1.2 Southwestern Public Health with an update on the 2023 budget levy and a request to present at an upcoming council meeting. Does anyone wish to speak to this? Councillor Cookett.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I was at the meeting that the budget was discussed, and just to comment that there was a lively discussion on actually asking for more money from everybody, including the county and the city, but I'm not sure that that'll happen, but I think the presentation from Southwest Public Health will outline the reasons for their concern with the health indicators that were discussed for a long time. So look forward to Southwest Health's presentation.
Well, thank you for those comments. Yes, Councillor Jiguer.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yes, I would welcome a presentation as well. I would like to request, as probably everyone has noted, there are numerous priorities and that are listed, but there were many priorities listed last year as well. So I would like the presentation to include a report card on all of the priorities that were identified prior and what's the status of those, just put to add more context.
Thank you for that. Any other additional comments? I would just like to add, there's been several years since we've had a presentation from Southwest Public Health. It's overdue. It's time that we had them back in the room and they can present their budget and report card, so to speak, to us. So I too would look forward to that. Okay, Julie, have you got something smithed out for that?
Be it resolved that staff be directed to arrange that Southwestern Public Health provide a delegation regarding 2023 initiatives and to include a follow-up report on 2022 initiatives.
Okay, mover and seconder, Councillor Cookett will move. And seconded by Councillor Jiguer. All in favor? Oh, that's carried. Thank you. 7.2 items to receive for information. The consent agenda. We can deal with all these as. All right. Yes. All right, you have several items in front of you. Have the Elgin Clean Water Program 2022 annual report, the resolution from the Township of Southwold supporting the municipality of West Elgin's request for the County of Elgin to review parking bylaw 𝗖cie𝘂_1, a letter from Tom Manley, President of the Otter Valley Naturalists regarding the National Wildlife Federation of the USA's initiative, the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. 7.24, the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission of Ontario update, including an email from Jill Ferguson, Assistant 𝗘𝗹𝗴𝗶 MP regarding the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission for Ontario final report, the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus media release, And the correspondence regarding Bill 63, St. Thomas Central Elgin Boundary Adjustment Act. Is there any particular item that anyone wishes to discuss, make comment on, ask questions? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Warden. Just a comment on the electoral boundaries report. This is one of the few times that we actually get a win. I know there's a huge amount of electronic correspondence that went to the commission in regards to that. And also the night we had in London, I think there's about 35, 38 presentations and there's none supporting it, not one. So it's at least they listened this time.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else on anything else on the consent agenda? Just to, again, in addition to the 725, the piece of correspondence was handed out to you this morning, which is just additional follow-up with regarding the Boundary Adjustment Act. Just some questions that we put forward to the ministry and had some answers in time for today's council. So is there, you're going to let staff off fairly easy? Well, all right then.
Be it resolved that correspondence items 7.2.1 to 7.2.5 be received and filed.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Hens will move. Councillor Jones will second. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Which brings us down to section 8, other business. 8.1, statements, inquiries by members. 8.2, notice of motion. 8.3, matters of urgency. Which brings us to section 9, closed meeting items. Please.
Be it resolved that we do now proceed into closed meeting session in accordance with the Municipal Act to discuss the following matters under Municipal Act Section 239.2. In camera item number 1, which is IT contract negotiations, and that's 239.2K. And in camera item number 2, which is an organizational update, and that's 239.2B.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Noble will move. And Councillor Sloan will second. All in favor? That's carried. So while we're going into in camera.
Be it resolved that we do now rise and report.
Councillor Jones and Councillor Noble will second. All in favor? Carried. In camera item number 1.
Be it resolved that the Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Legal Services proceed as directed.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Hens will move and Councillor Widner will second. All in favor? That's carried. In camera item number 2.
Be it resolved that the confidential report from the Chief Administrative Officer be received for information.
Thank you. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Sloan will move. Councillor Noble will second. All in favor? That's carried. Section 11, motion to adopt recommendations from the Committee of the Whole.
Be it resolved that we do now adopt recommendations of the Committee of the Whole.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Jones will move and Councillor Sloan will second. All in favor? That's carried. Confirming bylaw.
Be it a first, second, and third read of bylaw 23-10 being a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the Municipal Council of the Corporation of the County of Elgin at the February 28th, 2023 meeting.
Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Sloan will move. Councillor Hens will second. All in favor, please. That's carried. And finally, the adjournment motion.
Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 12:22 p.m. to meet again on March 14th, 2023 at 9:00 a.m.
Thank you. And was moved by Councillor Widner. His hand was up real quick and Councillor Sloan will second that. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Very good meeting. Everyone enjoy the rest of the day.
Right?